There's a reservoir in Arizona that has almost disappeared. From a satellite image, San Carlos Lake still looks like a major body of water. But stand on a shoreline today, and you may struggle to find the lake at all. A reservoir built to store more than 900,000 acre-feet of water has been reduced to a tiny fraction of that amount. Areas that were once underwater are now covered in dust, cracked earth, and patches of grass. Boat ramps lead nowhere. The shoreline stretches farther into the basin every week, and the water is still dropping. For most people, the explanation seems obvious. Arizona is dry. The Southwest is in drought. Case closed. But San Carlos Lake tells a more complicated story, because drought is only one piece of what happened here. The real story involves a century-old dam, tribal land, irrigation canals, disappearing fish, and a river that has been asked to provide more water than nature can consistently deliver. And the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. To understand how this happened, you have to travel back nearly 100 years. In the late 1920s, the federal government completed Coolidge Dam on the Gila River in eastern Arizona. At the time, it was considered one of the most impressive engineering projects in the region. The dam rises nearly 250 feet above the canyon floor and was designed to capture enormous amounts of water for agriculture downstream. Behind the structure, San Carlos Lake was created. On paper, it looked like a solution. In reality, it became one of the most unpredictable reservoirs in the American West. The reason is simple. The Gila River does not behave like many major rivers. Its flow changes dramatically from year to year. When heavy snowpack and strong seasonal rains arrive, the reservoir can rise rapidly. When those conditions disappear, the lake can collapse with astonishing speed. Over the decades, San Carlos Lake has experienced both extremes. It has approached full capacity several times. It has also come dangerously close to empty. Again and again. That boom-and-bust cycle has defined the lake for nearly a century. And now the reservoir is experiencing another collapse. Only this time, officials say the decline is arriving earlier than normal. That matters because summer has not even reached its hottest stage yet. A lake that begins the season nearly empty has very little protection against months of intense heat. And heat is one of San Carlos Lake's biggest enemies. Look at the geography. The reservoir sits inside the San Carlos Apache Reservation, surrounded by desert landscapes where temperatures can easily climb above 110 degrees. When water levels fall, the lake becomes wider and shallower. That creates a dangerous feedback loop. The shallower the water becomes, the faster it warms. The faster it warms, the more water evaporates. And the more water evaporates, the faster the lake shrinks. It is a cycle that feeds itself. But evaporation alone does not explain everything, because water is still leaving the reservoir through another route. Downstream demand. For decades, water stored behind Coolidge Dam has supported agricultural operations far beyond the lake itself. Water released from the reservoir travels down the Gila River before entering irrigation systems that serve large areas of farmland. Those farms depend on reliable deliveries. The problem is that agricultural demand does not disappear simply because a drought arrives. Even when inflows decline, pressure remains to move water downstream. As a result, the reservoir faces pressure from both directions at once. Less water enters, more water leaves, and the lake continues shrinking. The impact is visible everywhere around the basin. Start with the fish. San Carlos Lake was once considered one of Arizona's most respected fishing destinations. Anglers traveled long distances hoping to catch largemouth bass, catfish, crappie, and bluegill. State record fish have come from these waters. For years, the reservoir built a reputation as one of the best fishing lakes in the state. Today, that reputation is under threat. As water levels drop, fish are forced into smaller and smaller areas. The remaining pools become warmer. Oxygen levels decline, and biologists worry about large-scale fish kills if conditions continue to deteriorate. It is not just a recreational problem. It is an ecological one. Entire aquatic systems depend on water levels that no longer exist. Then there is the local economy. When people think about a shrinking lake, they often picture empty shorelines. What they do not see are the businesses connected to that water. Fishing permits, guides, campgrounds, supplies, visitors. Every one of those activities depends on people having a reason to come. When a lake disappears, many of those visitors disappear as well. For the San Carlos Apache Reservation, that loss carries real economic consequences. And the story becomes even more complicated when you look beneath the waterline. Because before there was a reservoir, there was a community. The creation of San Carlos Lake flooded parts of the original Apache homeland. Homes disappeared beneath the water. Historic sites disappeared beneath the water. Burial grounds disappeared beneath the water. For decades, those places remained hidden. But when lake levels fall dramatically, parts of that history begin to reappear. The exposed landscape becomes a reminder of what existed before the reservoir was built. For many tribal members, this is not simply a drought story. It is also a story about land, history, and control of water resources. And those questions remain unresolved nearly a century later. Meanwhile, downstream farmers face challenges of their own. Water allocations have been reduced. Planning has become more difficult. And uncertainty continues growing. That is the irony of the entire situation. The reservoir was created to provide water security. Yet both the lake and the users who depend on it are now dealing with insecurity. Everyone connected to the river feels the pressure. The tribe, the farmers, the recreation industry, the wildlife, even the infrastructure itself. And the numbers show just how dramatic the decline has been. Only a few years ago, the reservoir contained hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water. Today, it holds only a tiny fraction of that amount. The difference is staggering. A lake that once appeared to be recovering has once again fallen toward empty conditions. That is why many observers believe San Carlos Lake represents something larger than a local problem. Across the American West, reservoirs built during the 20th century are facing growing stress. Population growth continues. Water demand continues. Periods of extreme drought continue. The balance that once seemed stable is becoming harder to maintain. San Carlos Lake may simply be showing the future before other places see it themselves. So what happens next? The honest answer is that nobody knows. A series of strong winters could bring relief. Heavy snowpack in the mountains could increase river flows. A few exceptionally wet seasons could refill large portions of the reservoir surprisingly fast. It has happened before, but that possibility exists alongside another reality. If drought conditions persist, if inflows remain weak, and if demand continues, the reservoir could fall even further. The trend is what concerns many observers most. Not just that the lake is shrinking, but that it appears to be reaching critical levels earlier and earlier. And that changes everything. Because a reservoir can survive one bad season, it can survive two. What becomes much harder is surviving decades of repeating stress. That is the question hanging over San Carlos Lake today. Not whether it can recover once, but whether the system built around it can keep working if these cycles continue. A massive dam still stands over the Gila River. The canals still stretch across the desert. The demands on the water remain, but the lake itself keeps getting smaller. And in eastern Arizona, the exposed mud, abandoned shoreline, and shrinking pools are sending a message that is becoming harder to ignore. San Carlos Lake is not just losing water. It is testing how long an entire region can depend on a reservoir that spends more and more time on the edge of disappearing.